Neo-Athena sprawled across the horizon, a gleaming testament to humanity's technological prowess. In the year 2147, the city's silver spires and hovering platforms embodied mankind's relentless march toward perfection. But perfection, as Kira Stone well knew, required constant vigilance against those who would disrupt the harmony. Kira adjusted her neural interface, the small device behind her right ear pulsing with a soft blue light as she approached the Mind Directive headquarters. The imposing structure of obsidian and chrome stretched toward the sky, its architecture designed to inspire both awe and subtle intimidation. Just how she liked it. Agent Stone, the security AI acknowledged as she passed through the biometric scanners. Director Mercer is expecting your report on level 47. She nodded curtly, stepping into the gravity lift. As the city's most efficient mind reader, Kira had built her reputation on precision and detachment. 174 successful mind interventions over 8 years. No resistance, no errors, no emotional entanglements. The perfect record for the perfect agent. The lift deposited her at a minimalist corridor where Director Valen Mercer waited, his tall frame silhouetted against the panoramic view of Neo-Athena. "You've reviewed the file?" he asked without turning. "Yes, sir. Nate Cadell, public AI maintenance engineer, suspected of tampering with surveillance nodes in District 7. Kira's voice remained clinical, betraying nothing of the subtle interest she felt. Most of her targets were straightforward: criminal elements, political dissidents, or corporate spies. A maintenance engineer seemed unusually mundane. Mercer turned, his augmented eyes glowing faintly. "This is more significant than routine tampering. Stone. Our algorithms have flagged anomalous behavior patterns. Cadell has accessed restricted protocols 18 times in the past month. Each instance coincided with security blackouts in residential sectors. Potential terrorism?" Kira raised an eyebrow. "Or worse, ideological contamination. There's a disturbing resurgence of privacy extremists. People who believe thoughts should remain private." He practically spat the last word. Kira suppressed a smile. The concept seemed almost quaint. Privacy of thought had been legally abolished decades ago when the Mind Directive was established. The social contract was simple: surrender thought privacy, gain a crime-free society. The majority had eagerly accepted. "I want you to extract everything," Mercer continued. "Not just surface thoughts or recent memories. I want motive, affiliations, accomplices. Be thorough." "Authorization for deep cognitive penetration?" Kira confirmed, maintaining her professional tone despite her surprise. Such invasive procedures were rarely sanctioned outside major security threats. Mercer handed her a clearance chip. "Full access. This comes from the Council itself. If Cadell is connected to the resistance cells we've been tracking, this could be our breakthrough." Kira pocketed the chip, her mind already shifting to operational mode. "Where is he being held?" "Interrogation room 12. He believes this is a routine questioning about system malfunctions." Mercer's lips curled slightly. He has no idea what's coming. Neither did she. Interrogation room 12 was deliberately designed to appear less threatening than it was. Comfortable chairs, ambient lighting, even decorative plants, all concealing the neural dampeners and thought monitoring equipment embedded in the walls. Nate Cadell sat alone, his lanky frame hunched slightly as he examined something on his personal device. Kira observed him through the one-way glass. Early 30s, unkempt brown hair, intelligent eyes that darted quickly across information. No visible augmentations unusual for someone in tech. A naturalist, perhaps, that would align with anti-surveillance sentiments. Kira entered, noting how his posture straightened immediately. Wariness. Good. Awareness made the mind more active, thoughts more accessible. Mr. Cadell, I'm Agent Stone. She sat across from him, placing her credentials on the table between them. Standard procedure, establishing authority. I've already explained everything to the previous officers, he said, his voice calmer than his elevated heart rate suggested. The AI glitches in Sector 7 were hardware failures, not tampering. I filed the maintenance reports. Kira smiled professionally. This is just a follow-up. We like to be thorough. 4 interrogations for routine maintenance issues seems beyond thorough. His eyes met hers directly. What is this really about, Agent Stone? Interesting. Direct confrontation rather than nervous evasion. Either he had nothing to hide, or he was exceptionally trained in countermeasures. Just a few inconsistencies we'd like to clarify. She activated her neural interface subtly. You've been accessing Level 3 security protocols during your maintenance rounds. Those are restricted to emergency override situations. Because the primary interface was corrupted, he replied without hesitation. It's all in my reports. I followed standard procedure. Kira nodded, appearing to accept his explanation while her interface silently connected with the room's neural network. She could sense his surface thoughts now. Annoyance, concern about being late for another appointment, calculations about power fluctuations in the city grid, nothing immediately suspicious. Let's try something different, she suggested, leaning forward slightly. A simple cognitive alignment to verify your statements. Completely painless. Standard procedure. His eyes narrowed. You mean a mind read? That requires consent or a judicial order. We have authorization. She placed Mercer's clearance chip on the table. But consent would make the process more comfortable. Nate tensed visibly. On what grounds? I fix AI nodes for a living. I'm not a criminal. Then you have nothing to hide. The phrase was cliched but effective. Kira had already begun the preliminary neural mapping, establishing pathways into his thought patterns. She could force entry if necessary, but voluntary compliance caused less mental resistance. Nate sat back, jaw tight. Fine. Limited surface verification only. I know my rights. Kira smiled. Rights were irrelevant with the authorization she carried, but letting him believe he had some control would keep his defenses lower. Relax and focus on the maintenance work you performed in Sector 7, she instructed, activating the full suite of her mind-reading capabilities. She entered his consciousness with practiced precision, navigating the familiar architecture of human thought. Surface impressions first, genuine frustration, professional pride in his work, concern about being falsely accused. Nothing unusual. Kira pushed deeper, past immediate thoughts to recent memories. The maintenance calls, his careful work on the AI nodes, conversations with colleagues. Still nothing suspicious. She frowned slightly. Mercer's intelligence had suggested clear evidence of tampering. Either it was wrong, or Nate was exceptionally skilled at hiding his thoughts, a rare ability that usually required extensive training. Is something wrong? Nate asked, noticing her concentration. Just getting clarity, she murmured, pushing deeper. Past recent memories into core belief structures and formative experiences. That's when she felt it, a strange resistance, not the usual psychological barrier, but something almost artificial, a partition in his mind, protecting something. Found you, she thought with satisfaction. This was exactly what she'd been looking for. Hidden thoughts, sequestered memories, classic signs of ideological contamination. Kira concentrated, focusing her considerable abilities on breaching the mental barrier. It was stronger than she expected, suggesting either implanted technology or remarkable natural resistance. I don't consent to deep cognitive penetration, Nate said sharply, beginning to pull away. This won't take long, Kira replied, using her voice to mask her mental assault on his defenses. The barrier was weakening. She could feel it beginning to fracture under her experienced pressure. With a final surge of effort, she broke through and the world exploded into chaos. Not thoughts, not beliefs, but a memory. Vivid, violent, overwhelming. Children screaming, a sterile facility, mind directive uniforms, blood on white floors. Kira gasped, losing her professional composure as the images flooded her consciousness. Young subjects strapped to neural induction chairs, their small bodies convulsing as thought extraction equipment overloaded their developing brains. Scientists observing, taking notes. Mind directive officers supervising. And there, at the edge of the memory, herself, younger, watching with clinical detachment as a child seized and went still. No, she whispered, trying to pull back from the memory. But it had hooked into her own consciousness, dragging forward fractured images from her own past that made no sense. The same facility, the same children, but this time through her eyes, not Nate's. Impossible. With a violent effort, Kira severed the connection, recoiling physically. She found herself standing, breath coming in quick gasps, the room's alarm system blaring in response to her elevated vital signs. Across the table, Nate stared at her with an expression not of fear or anger, but of profound pity. You saw it, he said quietly. You finally saw what they made you forget. Before Kira could respond, the door burst open and security personnel flooded in, responding to the alarms. In the confusion, she glimpsed Nate's face one last time. He wasn't resisting arrest. Instead, he was watching her with an intensity that suggested this encounter had gone exactly as he had planned. The realization hit her with stomach-churning clarity just as Mercer appeared in the doorway, his augmented eyes assessing the situation instantly. She hadn't been sent to investigate Nate Cadell. Nate Cadell had arranged to be investigated by her. A director? She managed, fighting to regain her composure. The subject has implanted false memories. Possible technological tampering. Mercer's gaze shifted between her and Nate, suspicion evident. Secure the subject for full neural mapping. Agent Stone, report to medical for evaluation. As they led Nate away, his eyes never left Kira's. And within her mind, the fractured memory pulsed like an open wound, impossible to ignore and even more impossible to accept. Because if that memory was real, everything she believed about herself and the organization she served was a lie. And if it was false, implanted somehow by this unassuming engineer, then he possessed technology that made him the most dangerous man in Neo-Athena. Either way, Kira Stone's perfect record had just been shattered, along with her certainty about which side of this invisible war she was truly on. Medical examination revealed nothing physically wrong with Kira, which was almost more disturbing than finding an anomaly. The senior physician, a stern woman with more mechanical parts than organic, declared her neural pathways uncompromised. There's no evidence of external memory implantation or cognitive tampering, she concluded, removing the diagnostic crown from Kira's head. Whatever you experienced was generated internally. That's impossible, Kira insisted, sitting up on the examination table. Those weren't my memories. The physician's expression remained impassive. The mind is complex. Agent Stone, stress, fatigue, or even random neural misfiring can create convincing false recollections. I'm prescribing cognitive stabilizers. Kira accepted the medication packet automatically, her training taking over despite her internal turmoil. Show compliance. Give yourself time to think. You're cleared to return to duty, the physician continued. But Director Mercer has requested you take 24 hours for recovery, a day off in 8 years. Kira had never been given recovery time, another indication that something was very wrong. She left medical with measured steps, maintaining the composed demeanor expected of a senior agent. Inside, her thoughts raced through possibilities. The memory felt real, not just emotionally impactful but structurally sound, with consistent details and sensory information typically absent in fabrications. And her own presence in it, that detail nagged at her most persistently. Rather than heading to her assigned living quarters, Kira made a decision. If Mercer was watching her, and she had to assume he was, any suspicious movement would trigger intervention. She needed to appear to be following orders while pursuing answers. The public transportation hub offered both anonymity and access, boarding a mag train to Residential District 9 where she lived. Kira used her neural interface to access the Mind Directive's secure database. Basic information on Nate Cadell would be expected given their interaction. Anything deeper would raise flags. His file appeared straightforward. 34 years old, born in Neo-Athena, mid-level technical credentials, no family connections of note, 8 years of unremarkable service maintaining public AI systems, no prior criminal record or suspicious activities until the recent security alerts. Too clean, like a carefully constructed identity. The mag train hummed softly as it glided between the city's towering structures. Through the window, Kira observed citizens going about their daily lives, secure in the knowledge that the Mind Directive protected them from hidden threats and criminal intentions. She had always taken pride in providing that security. Now doubt crept in like a virus. One detail in Cadell's file caught her attention. His residence was listed in Sector 12, the engineering quarter, not close to the maintenance issues in Sector 7. Why would he be assigned there consistently? Kira disembarked at her designated stop but didn't head toward her apartment. Instead, she took a service elevator to the rooftop garden, one of the few places in Neo-Athena with minimal surveillance. There, among the carefully cultivated plants, she activated her personal encrypted communication channel. Yang, I need to see you. Unofficial. The message went out to Dr. Lian Yang, the Mind Directive's chief neuropsychologist and one of the few people Kira might cautiously call a friend. The response came almost immediately. Botanical Gardens, East Pavilion. 1 hour. Changing direction. Kira headed back to the transportation hub. If anyone was tracking her movements, a visit to the Botanical Gardens wouldn't seem suspicious. Agents were encouraged to spend time in calming environments to maintain optimal mental health. The sprawling gardens occupied a massive biodome in the center of Neo-Athena, one of the city's few concessions to nature amidst its technological landscape. Kira wound her way through exotic plants and carefully maintained ecosystems until she reached the Eastern Pavilion, a quiet spot overlooking a pond filled with genetically restored lotus flowers. Dr. Yang was already waiting, her tall figure gazing out at the water. At 62, Lian Yang had been with the Mind Directive since its inception, her brilliance in neuropsychology fundamental to developing many of their thought-reading technologies. Unlike most senior officials, she had few visible augmentations. Only a subtle neural port at her temple betrayed her technological enhancements. This is unexpected, Yang said without turning. You never request informal meetings. I've never needed one before. Kira stood beside her, maintaining the appearance of casual conversation should anyone observe them. I experienced something during an interrogation. Something impossible. Yang's eyes remained on the lotus flowers. Describe it. Kira recounted the memory she had encountered in Nate's mind, carefully including every detail she could recall. The facility, the children, the experiments, her own presence, When she finished, Yang was silent for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Project Lighthouse, she said softly. Kira felt her breath catch. What? Not here. Yang straightened, her professional demeanor returning. My private office. Tomorrow morning. Request an official psychological evaluation following your traumatic experience during the interrogation. Ilian, what is Project Lighthouse? Kira pressed. It's something that doesn't exist. Yang's eyes finally met hers, conveying a warning. And never mention that name where you might be heard. Before Kira could respond, Yang walked away, leaving her alone with more questions than answers and the unsettling certainty that her world was unraveling strand by strand. That night, in her sterile apartment with its regulation furnishings and hidden monitoring systems, Kira did something she hadn't done in years. She disconnected her neural interface, removing the small device from behind her ear and placing it in its charging station. The immediate sensation was one of muffled isolation. Without the constant background flow of information and the subtle connection to the city's network, the world seemed distant, dull. Most citizens found the disconnection intolerable after more than a few minutes. Kira had been trained to endure it for operational purposes, but even she felt the discomfort of being truly alone in her own mind, which was precisely what she needed now. With the interface removed, her thoughts were her own, at least as much as possible in a society where privacy was considered obsolete. There would still be visual and audio surveillance in her apartment, but her actual thoughts were temporarily beyond reach. She sat cross-legged on her bed, closed her eyes, and did what mind directive agents were specifically trained not to do. She turned her mind-reading abilities inward. Most people couldn't access their own deepest memories through self-reflection. The brain naturally protected itself, creating barriers between conscious thought and potentially traumatic or conflicting information. This self-protection was one reason the Mind Directive's thought-reading technology had been so revolutionary. It bypassed natural defenses, but Kira wasn't most people. 8 years of training to navigate others' minds had given her unique insights into the architecture of memory and consciousness. If there was something buried in her own mind, something about children and experiments and Project Lighthouse, perhaps she could find traces of it. The process was disorienting. Her consciousness seemed to fold in on itself as she pushed past surface thoughts and recent memories, diving deeper into the foundations of her identity. Years of missions for the directive, training exercises, her recruitment. Before that, fragmented images, a different life, a university, studies in neuroscience and psychology, a passionate belief in the potential of mind-reading technology to create a better world. And then, nothing. A void where memories should be. Not the natural haziness of distant recollections, but a deliberate absence, as if portions of her past had been surgically removed. Kira pushed harder, focusing on that emptiness, trying to find its edges. Pain lanced through her head, a neurological warning system activating. Still, she persisted, following the trail of absence back. A flash, white walls, equipment, a child's face contorted in fear. The pain intensified, becoming almost unbearable. Kira gasped, losing her concentration as her body forcibly pulled her out of the deep mental state. Blood trickled from her nose, a physical manifestation of the neurological strain. But she had seen enough to know one thing with absolute certainty. There was something in her past that had been deliberately hidden from her own consciousness. And somehow, Nate Cadell had known about it. She needed to see him again. But first, she needed to understand what Project Lighthouse was and why Dr. Yang had recognized it immediately. Morning found Kira with her neural interface reconnected, outwardly composed as she entered Mind Directive Headquarters. She had filed an official request for psychological evaluation, citing cognitive disturbance following subject interrogation, language that would raise no immediate alarms while giving her access to Dr. Yang. The psychology division occupied the eastern wing of the headquarters, its atmosphere subtly different from the stark efficiency of the operational sections. Warmer lighting, natural materials, even real paper books, all designed to put the human mind at ease. Yang's office reflected her senior status, spacious, with a spectacular view of the city and enhanced privacy protocols that exceeded standard specifications. When Kira entered, Yang was reviewing holographic brain scans, her expression thoughtful. "Agent Stone," she acknowledged formally, activating additional privacy measures with a subtle gesture. The windows polarized, and a soft hum indicated sonic isolation had engaged. "I've reviewed your report of yesterday's incident." Kira remained standing, her posture perfect. "Thank you for seeing me, Dr. Yang." Yang studied her for a moment, then pointed to a chair positioned away from the door and any potential surveillance points. "Sit. Tell me about these disturbing images you experienced during the Cadell interrogation." Kira complied, repeating her account from yesterday, the children, the facility, her own presence. As she spoke, Yang made notes on an analog pad, another unusual choice in their digital world. When Kira finished, Yang slid the pad across to her. Written in precise characters was a message. "Your office contains 19 surveillance points. Mine has 3, all currently receiving a looped feed. We have approximately 12 minutes of true privacy." Kira nodded slightly, acknowledging the information without commenting on it. "Project Lighthouse," Yang said quietly, "was initiated 22 years ago under Director Elias Cross, Valen Mercer's predecessor and mentor." "What was its purpose?" Kira asked, her voice equally low. "Originally, to develop more effective thought-reading technology for children." Yang's expression remained carefully neutral. The official justification was early intervention for potentially violent or antisocial tendencies, preventing future criminals by identifying and redirecting dangerous thought patterns in youth. And unofficially, Yang's eyes met hers directly. Cross believed children's minds were more adaptable, more programmable. He wasn't just interested in reading thoughts. He wanted to control them, to create the perfect citizens for his vision of society. The implications settled like ice in Kira's stomach. "The children in the memory. Test subjects," Yang confirmed. "Orphans mostly, children from the lower sectors whose disappearances wouldn't be questioned. The program ran for 3 years before it was officially terminated due to ethical concerns and insufficient results." "But it wasn't actually terminated, was it?" Kira pressed. "No." Yang glanced at a subtle timer on her desk. "It was reconfigured. The focus shifted from controlling thoughts to managing memories, specifically removing them." The pieces began falling into place. "I was part of it somehow." Yang's expression softened slightly, the closest to sympathy Kira had ever seen from her. "Not as a child subject, as a researcher. You were one of the most promising young neuropsychologists I'd ever worked with. Brilliant, dedicated to improving society through thought technology. You believed in the potential for good." The information hit Kira like a physical blow. "I was a scientist, not an agent. You were recruited to the scientific division directly from university. Your work on mapping neural pathways was revolutionary." Yang's voice held a note of old pride. "But when you were assigned to Project Lighthouse, you began to have concerns." I objected to experimenting on children, Kira surmised, the scenario playing out with horrible clarity. More than objected. You gathered evidence, documented the abuses, and planned to expose everything. Yang checked her timer again. 3 minutes. What you need to know now is that you never got the chance. The night before you planned to release your findings, you were arrested for attempted espionage. Your memories were selectively erased using the very technology you had helped perfect, and you were reprogrammed as an agent. Kira struggled to process this revelation. Why not just eliminate me entirely? A waste of resources. Your mind was too valuable. Yang's tone turned bitter, and it served as a perfect demonstration of the technology's effectiveness. Turn the project's greatest threat into its greatest asset. And Nate Cadell? How does he know about this? That, Yang said, was what troubles me most. He shouldn't know. All records were purged. All participants either eliminated or, like you, reprogrammed, unless there were other survivors. Kira finished. People who got away. Yang nodded grimly. 7 minutes. One more thing you should know. After your reprogramming, I was assigned as your handler to monitor for any signs of memory recovery. I've been watching you for 8 years, reporting that the procedure remained effective. You've been lying for me. Kira realized. Why? Because I've spent 20 years trying to atone for my role in creating this system. Yang stood, indicating their time was nearly up. The memory you experienced wasn't implanted by Cadell. It was your own, breaking through the artificial barriers. The fact that you saw it at all means the reprogramming is failing. Which means I'm a liability now, Kira concluded. Precisely. Yang deactivated the privacy measures, the windows clearing as the room returned to normal monitoring status. In a louder, official tone, she said, I'm prescribing a neurological regulator. Agent Stone, your symptoms appear to be stress-related, but we'll monitor for any further cognitive disturbances. She handed Kira a small case containing medication. Inside, beneath the pills, was a small data chip. Take 1 regulator every 12 hours, Yang instructed, her eyes conveying the importance of the hidden item. And come back in 3 days for a follow-up assessment. Kira accepted the case, her mind racing with implications and possibilities. Thank you, Dr. Yang. Of course, Agent. Yang's professional demeanor was back in place, but her final words carried double meaning. Remember, the mind can heal itself if given the proper tools. As Kira left the psychology division, she maintained her practiced composure despite the internal storm. Everything she believed about herself, her identity, her purpose, her place in society, had been revealed as an elaborate construction. A lie enforced by the very organization she had served with unwavering loyalty. And somewhere in Neo-Athena, locked in a mind-directive holding cell, was a man who had deliberately triggered her buried memories. A man who might hold the key to who she truly was. She needed to find Nate Cadell. But first, she needed to understand what was on the data chip Dr. Yang had risked everything to give her. The holding cells where Nate Cadell would be kept were 27 floors below where Kira now stood. Accessing them without authorization would be nearly impossible, especially with the elevated security that would surround such an unusual prisoner. But before attempting anything so dangerous, she needed information. The data chip burned in her pocket like a live coal as she navigated the headquarters with purposeful steps. Her destination was one of the few places where she might safely access its contents, the secure analysis room used by agents to review classified information. Kira signed in with her credentials, citing follow-up investigation on the Cadell case as her reason for using the facility. The technician nodded. Her continued interest in a case she'd been involved with would seem natural. The room was a small, featureless cube with a single terminal disconnected from the main network, designed for reviewing sensitive material that shouldn't be transmitted. Kira sealed the door and initiated the privacy protocol, buying herself 15 unmonitored minutes. She inserted Yang's chip into the reader, fingers moving swiftly across the interface to bypass the standard logging procedures. The screen flickered, then displayed a single file labeled simply LH. Lighthouse. The file contained personnel records, dozens of scientists, technicians, and security staff who had worked on the project. Kira scanned through them rapidly, looking for her own name. There it was. Dr. Kira Stone, neurological mapping specialist, recruitment date, security clearance, project contributions. Seeing her credentials in black and white made the revelation more tangible, more undeniable. But Yang had included something else. Surveillance footage, dated 8 years ago, the night Kira had supposedly been arrested. The video showed a laboratory similar to the one from the fractured memory. Kira watched herself, a slightly younger version wearing a researcher's uniform instead of an agent's, frantically copying files, looking over her shoulder repeatedly. The younger Kira in the video finished her task, removed a data chip similar to the one Yang had provided, and concealed it in her clothing. Then she turned toward the camera, her expression resolute but fearful, and mouthed words that current Kira could easily read. The children deserve justice. Moments later, security personnel burst into the lab. The younger Kira attempted to run but was quickly subdued. The last frame showed her unconscious form being carried away. The footage ended, replaced by a text message from Yang. The original chip was never found. Security believed you had an accomplice who escaped with the evidence. Nate Cadell matches no known associates from that period. Exercise extreme caution. Kira stared at the screen, absorbing the implications. She had tried to expose the project and failed. Her memories had been erased, her personality overwritten to serve the very organization she had opposed. But somewhere, possibly, evidence still existed, evidence she had risked everything to preserve. And perhaps Nate Cadell knew where it was. The 15 minutes were nearly up. Kira quickly erased all traces of the chip's contents from the terminal, removed the physical chip, and composed herself. When she exited the room, she would need to appear as nothing more than a dedicated agent following up on a case. But inside, everything had changed. The loyalty and purpose that had defined her existence for 8 years had been revealed as artificial constructs. The real Kira Stone, the woman she had been before the mind directive rewrote her consciousness, would have been horrified by the actions she had performed as an agent. How many minds had she invaded? How many lives had she helped the directive control in the name of security and social harmony? As Kira left the secure analysis room, her decision was made. She would find Nate Cadell. She would recover whatever evidence still existed about Project Lighthouse. And she would finish what she had started 8 years ago, exposing the truth, whatever the cost. But accessing a high-security prisoner wouldn't be simple, even for a senior agent. She needed a plan, and she needed it quickly. Because if Yang was right about the memory suppression failing, it was only a matter of time before the directive realized their perfect agent was remembering who she really was. The detention level required special authorization. Authorization Kira didn't have for Cadell's case since she'd been officially removed after the interrogation incident. But the mind directive's security, while extensive, contained a fundamental flaw. It assumed absolute loyalty from its agents. No one expected an agent to try to deceive the system. Kira waited until shift change. The brief window when monitoring was at its least effective as personnel transitioned. Then she approached the detention level checkpoint with the confident stride of someone exactly where they belonged. Agent Stone. She acknowledged the security officer crisply. I need to conduct a follow-up cognitive assessment on prisoner Cadell. The officer frowned slightly, checking his terminal. I don't see an authorization for that. It was just issued, Kira replied smoothly, sending a forged authorization through her neural interface. The forgery wouldn't withstand close scrutiny, but it only needed to work for a few moments. Dr. Yang's orders. We're seeing anomalous patterns that require immediate investigation. The mention of Yang, a senior division head, gave the necessary weight to her request. The officer nodded, the authorization appearing to process correctly in his system. Interrogation room 3 is available. I'll have the prisoner brought up. Thank you. Kira maintained her professional demeanor despite the tension coiling within her. The forgery would be discovered within hours, but by then, it wouldn't matter. Interrogation room 3 was smaller than the one where she'd first met Nate, but similarly equipped with thought monitoring technology. Kira disabled the most sensitive equipment under the guise of preventing interference with the assessment. Another action that would eventually raise flags but would give her the minutes she needed. When the door opened, Nate Cadell looked considerably worse than at their first meeting. His face showed bruising, and his movements were stiff as the guards directed him to the chair across from Kira. You can leave us, she told the guards. This is a delicate cognitive procedure. Once they were alone, Nate studied her face intently. You remembered, he said quietly. Not a question, but a statement. Enough to know I don't know nearly enough, Kira replied, keeping her voice low. Project Lighthouse, the experiments on children, my role as a researcher, but not how you're connected to any of it. A small smile touched his lips despite his injuries. We don't have much time. They'll realize soon that you're not here on official business. Then talk quickly, and how do you know about Lighthouse? Were you part of it? Not directly. Nate leaned forward. I was part of something else, the resistance network that formed in response to it. We call ourselves the Mind Liberty Coalition. The name triggered nothing in Kira's fragmented memories. And what is your interest in me specifically? You were a legend among us, Dr. Stone. There was genuine respect in his voice. The insider who nearly exposed everything, who sacrificed herself trying to save those children. Dr. Yang said I had an accomplice, someone who escaped with evidence. Nate nodded. Your research partner, Dr. Eliza Reyes. She got away with the data you collected, but not before witnessing your capture. She's been the heart of our resistance ever since, working to build the case against the Mind Directive, another name that should have meant something to Kira but didn't. And you arranged to be captured, to be interrogated by me specifically. Why? Because we needed you to remember. Nate's intensity was palpable. The evidence we have isn't enough without testimony from someone who was there. The directive has too much power, too many political connections. But you, their perfect agent turning against them with first-hand knowledge of their crimes, that would be impossible to dismiss. You risked your life on the chance that interrogating you might trigger my buried memories? Kira couldn't hide her disbelief. It wasn't chance. We developed technology based on your original research, targeted memory restoration. The memory you saw wasn't random. I was broadcasting it specifically to interface with your suppressed experiences. Kira processed this revelation, so you used me. We tried to save you, Nate corrected gently. The person you were, the real Kira Stone, would have wanted this. You dedicated your life to exposing what the directive was doing to those children. The fragments of memory she'd recovered supported his claim. But Kira still struggled with the fundamental disconnect between her current identity and this past self she couldn't fully remember. Where is this evidence now? She asked. A secure location, Eliza maintains it. Nate glanced at the door. But none of that matters if we don't get out of here. They'll execute me eventually, and once they realize your programming is failing, they'll either reset you or terminate you too. I can't just walk out with a prisoner, Kira pointed out. The building's security was designed by people who never expected their own agents to rebel. Nate finished. There are blind spots, vulnerabilities. Our people have mapped them all. You have infiltrators in the directive? The idea was both disturbing and reassuring. More than you'd think. People who've begun to question the ethics of thought control. Nate tapped his temple. The implant they took from me when I was arrested isn't just for memory projection. It contains an emergency evacuation plan, access codes, timing for security rotations, everything we need. But it's encrypted. Only you can unlock it. You me? How? Your neural signature. The encryption was designed to respond only to you. A fail-safe Eliza created in case we ever found you. Kira hesitated. Every instinct developed over 8 years as an agent screamed that this was treason, that she should report this conspiracy immediately. But those instincts had been programmed into her by the very organization that had violated her mind and identity. The real question was, who did she want to be? The loyal agent created by the directive, or the principled scientist who had risked everything to expose injustice? Where is the implant now? She asked. Decision made. Evidence lockup, 2 levels down, cataloged as unknown neural enhancement device. Kira nodded, formulating a plan. I can access it, but getting you out will be harder. Not if you trigger a Category 3 security breach, Nate suggested. It would force an automated evacuation protocol for this section. In the confusion, we'd still have to get past the perimeter guards and external scanners. Kira pointed out. One problem at a time. Nate's expression was grimly determined. Are you with us, Dr. Stone? The title still felt foreign to her, an identity she couldn't fully claim. But the fragmented memories, the children in pain, her own desperate attempt to save them, burned with a clarity that her constructed agent persona never had. Yes, she said simply, I'm with you. What followed was the most audacious security breach in mind directive history, orchestrated by the very agent who had once been their most effective tool. Kira's intimate knowledge of the security systems, combined with Nate's instructions, allowed her to create a cascading failure in the detention level's environmental controls. As alarms blared and emergency protocols activated, the automated systems began a controlled evacuation of all personnel and prisoners. In the calculated chaos, Kira diverted to the evidence lockup. Her senior agent credentials still provided access, and within minutes, she had located and secured Nate's neural implant, a sophisticated device far more advanced than standard civilian technology. Rejoining the evacuation flow, she found Nate being escorted with other prisoners toward the security checkpoint. A precisely timed neural pulse from her interface, directed at the checkpoint systems rather than human minds, created a momentary glitch in the identification scanners. In the confusion, Kira pulled Nate from the line, slipped his implant into his hand, and led him down a maintenance corridor that, according to his intelligence, would bypass the remaining security measures. If this doesn't work, she murmured as they hurried through the dimly lit passage. We'll both be terminated within hours. It'll work, Nate replied, inserting the implant behind his ear with practiced movements. The real Kira Stone helped design this escape route years ago. The reminder of this other self, this original identity she was only beginning to reclaim, sent another jolt of determination through her. They reached a service exit that opened onto a maintenance platform overlooking the lower city. Far below, the densely packed structures of Sector 12 offered countless places to disappear. Now comes the hard part, Nate said, gesturing to the dizzying drop. Hope you're not afraid of heights. Before Kira could respond, the door behind them burst open. Director Mercer stood there, flanked by security agents, his augmented eyes glowing with cold fury. Agent Stone, he said, his voice dangerously controlled. This is disappointing. Kira positioned herself between Mercer and Nate, her hand moving to her neural disruptor, standard agent equipment she had never expected to use against her own organization. The disappointment is mutual. Director, she replied. Project Lighthouse. Children experimented on. Memories erased. How long did you think you could keep that hidden? Something flickered across Mercer's face. Surprise. Quickly masked. So the memory suppression failed. Unfortunate, but fixable. He stepped forward, the security agents spreading out to flank them. Come back inside. Kira, we can adjust your neural patterns, make you whole again. I was whole before the directive broke into my mind, Kira countered, activating her disruptor. The small device hummed with energy, capable of temporarily disabling neural functions, including the enhanced capabilities of Mercer's augmented systems. You don't want to do this, Mercer warned. Even if you escape today, where will you go? The directive's reach extends throughout Neo-Athena. Every camera, every network access point will be watching for you. Then we'll just have to bring down the whole system, Nate said from behind Kira, his voice steady despite the precarious situation. Mercer's laugh was coldly dismissive. With what? Some fragmented memories and conspiracy theories? The Council will never believe you. The public trusts us to keep them safe. They trust you because they don't know what you've done, Kira replied. But they will. With that, she fired the neural disruptor. The pulse hit Mercer directly, overloading his augmented systems. He staggered, his enhanced eyes flickering as his neural interfaces temporarily failed. The security agents moved to intercept, but Kira was faster, years of agent training serving her well as she incapacitated the first two with precise strikes. The maintenance shaft, Nate called, pointing to a narrow passage leading downward. It connects to the lower city ventilation system. Kira dispatched the last security agent and followed Nate into the shaft, sealing the access point behind them. The narrow tunnel descended sharply, forcing them to use the service ladder embedded in its wall. Mercer will recover quickly, she warned as they climbed downward. And he'll lock down the entire sector. That's why we're not staying in this sector. Nate replied. We have safe houses established throughout the lower city, places the directive doesn't bother to monitor closely. The descent seemed endless, passing through the structural layers of Neo-Athena's massive central complex. Finally, they reached a junction where the maintenance shaft intersected with a larger ventilation tunnel. The air here was different, less filtered, carrying the authentic smells of the lower city. This way, Nate directed, leading her through a maze of tunnels that gradually widened until they emerged in what appeared to be an abandoned storage facility in the industrial district of Sector 14. The contrast with the sterile, controlled environment of Mind Directive headquarters was stark. Here, the infrastructure showed its age, with outdated technology and manual systems that hadn't been updated in decades. It was precisely this technological neglect that made it safer, fewer connections to the city's surveillance network. Welcome to the real Neo-Athena, Nate said, gesturing to their surroundings. The parts they don't show in the promotional materials. Kira took in the environment with new eyes. As an agent, she had visited the lower sectors only for operations, viewing them as hotbeds of potential dissidents rather than communities of actual people living beyond the directive's immediate control. How far does your network extend? She asked as Nate led her through a series of back alleys and unmarked doorways. Farther than the directive suspects. There have always been people who valued privacy of thought, even before the abuses began. Nate paused at a nondescript door, entering a complex code into an old-fashioned keypad. But after what happened with Project Lighthouse, resistance became more organized. The door opened to reveal a surprisingly well-equipped space, part living quarters, part technical workshop. Several people looked up from various workstations as they entered. Their expressions shifted from wariness to shock when they recognized Kira. "Is that?" a young woman began. "Yes," Nate confirmed. "Everyone, meet Dr. Kira Stone, the original Dr. Stone." The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on Kira with expressions ranging from awe to suspicion. "She helped us escape," Nate continued. "Her conditioning is breaking down. She remembers parts of Lighthouse." An older woman stepped forward, her intense gaze studying Kira's face. There was something vaguely familiar about her, something that tugged at Kira's fragmented memories. "Eliza," Kira breathed, the name coming to her unbidden. Dr. Eliza Reyes nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I never thought I'd see you again. Not as yourself. At least, I'm not sure who myself is anymore," Kira admitted. "I have pieces, fragments, enough to know the directive lied to me, used me, but not enough to fully understand what I was fighting for." "Then let me remind you," Eliza said, taking Kira's hand and leading her to a secure terminal in the corner of the room. 8 years ago, you and I discovered what Project Lighthouse was really doing to those children. Not just reading their thoughts or even controlling them temporarily. They were trying to create permanent neural pathways for complete thought compliance. The terminal activated, displaying horrific data, brain scans showing progressive neural degeneration, failed test subjects, clinical reports documenting acceptable losses in pursuit of the project's goals. The children who survived the initial experiments were being conditioned to become perfect citizens, unable to conceive of disobeying authority or questioning the social order. Eliza continued. "It wasn't mind-reading for security. It was mind-breaking for control. And I helped develop the technology," Kira said, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "Initially, yes, like all of us, you believed you were working on beneficial applications." Eliza's expression softened. "But when you discovered the truth, you were the one who acted. You documented everything, planned to expose it all, and you paid the price." "While you escaped with the evidence," Kira finished. "Evidence that hasn't been enough on its own," Nate interjected. "The directive has too much influence, too many political connections. They've dismissed our claims as fabrications, the work of anti-technology extremists. But with you, their own agent, with first-hand knowledge of the project, we finally have a chance." Eliza added, "If you're willing to help us." Kira stared at the terminal, at the faces of children who had suffered under a program she had unknowingly helped create. Children whose lives had been destroyed in the name of security and social harmony. The agent she had been for 8 years, loyal, efficient, believing in the directive's mission, was still part of her, still arguing for caution and order. But that identity had been built on lies, constructed over the ruins of who she truly was. "I need to remember everything," she said finally, looking up at Eliza. "Not just fragments. If I'm going to testify against the directive, I need my complete memories. We've been developing a procedure based on your original research," Eliza replied. "A way to reverse memory suppression without damaging the surrounding neural architecture. It's experimental, but—" "Do it," Kira interrupted. "Whatever the risks, I need to know who I really am." The procedure was conducted in a makeshift medical facility hidden beneath the safe house, a testament to how extensive the resistance network had become. As Eliza prepared the neural interface that would attempt to restore Kira's memories, the Resistance members maintained a constant watch for directive surveillance. The process targets the artificial barriers created during your reprogramming, Eliza explained, attaching sensors to Kira's temples. It won't be comfortable. Your mind will resist. The barriers were designed to be self-reinforcing. I understand. Kira lay back on the medical table, forcing herself to remain calm. Will I still be me afterward? The person I am now? Eliza's hands paused in their work. You'll be more yourself than you've been in 8 years. But yes, your experiences as an agent will remain part of you. We're not erasing anything, just restoring what was taken. It was both reassuring and terrifying. Kira had built an identity around being Agent Stone, around her skills and loyalty to the directive, even knowing it was based on manipulation. There was comfort in its clarity of purpose. Ready? Eliza asked, the neural interface humming softly as it activated. Kira nodded, closing her eyes. Do it. The initial sensation was like falling, a disorienting plunge into her own consciousness. Then came the pain, sharp and insistent, as the interface began breaking down the artificial barriers in her mind. Kira gritted her teeth, focusing on staying conscious as memories flooded back in chaotic bursts. University research, her early work on neural mapping, recruitment to the directive's scientific division, excitement about using technology to improve society. Then Project Lighthouse, initial optimism giving way to concern as she noticed discrepancies in the research protocols. Children arriving without proper documentation. Test subjects disappearing after failed responses. Her growing suspicions. Secret investigations with Eliza. The horrifying discovery of what was really happening to the children, not just monitoring but invasive neural restructuring that often resulted in permanent damage or death. The decision to gather evidence. Late nights documenting abuses, copying files, recording testimony from sympathetic staff. The growing fear of discovery balanced against the moral imperative to act. And finally, the night of her capture. The desperate attempt to transfer critical files to Eliza. The security forces breaking in. Her last conscious thought before they began the reprogramming procedure. A fierce determination that someday, somehow, the truth would come out. The memories crashed over her in waves, each more intense than the last, until Kira felt she might drown in the flood of recovered identity. Just when it seemed unbearable, the process began to stabilize, the fragments coalescing into a coherent narrative of who she had been and what had been done to her. When Kira opened her eyes, the world seemed simultaneously familiar and strange. She was still Agent Stone, with all the training and experiences of the past 8 years. But she was also Dr. Kira Stone, the neuropsychologist who had discovered the directive's darkest secret and sacrificed everything to expose it. Kira? Eliza leaned over her, concern evident in her expression. Can you hear me? Yes. Her voice sounded different to her own ears, more her own, somehow. I remember, Eliza. I remember everything. The tears that came then were for the lost years, for the children who had suffered, and for the person she had been forced to become. But beneath the grief was something stronger, something that had survived even the directive's most invasive reprogramming. Resolve. They have to be stopped, Kira said, sitting up despite the lingering disorientation. Not just Project Lighthouse, the entire system of thought control. It was never about security. It was always about power. Eliza helped her to her feet. That's why we need you, not just your memories, but your expertise. You understand the technology better than anyone, including how to counter it. In the main room of the safe house, Nate and the other resistance members were gathered around a tactical display, discussing security measures and communication protocols. They looked up as Kira entered, immediately recognizing from her expression that the procedure had worked. "Welcome back, Dr. Stone," Nate said with genuine warmth. "Thank you." Kira approached the display, her mind already working with renewed clarity. "How current is your information on directive security protocols?" "We have sources inside headquarters, but limited access to the highest levels," one of the technicians replied. "That's about to change." Kira pointed to the schematic of the directive's central database. "With my access codes and knowledge of the system architecture, we can bypass their primary defenses. But we'll need to move quickly. They'll be changing protocols after my defection." "What exactly are you proposing?" Nate asked. "A direct strike at the heart of their operation." Kira's voice was steady, determined. "We're not just going to expose Project Lighthouse. We're going to reveal everything, the full extent of thought monitoring, the manipulation of public sentiment, the suppression of dissent, the complete violation of mental autonomy that the directive has built its power on." "That's ambitious," Eliza said carefully. "The public has accepted thought monitoring for decades. Many believe it's necessary for security." "Because they don't know the truth," Kira countered. "They don't know what it really costs, not just in terms of privacy, but in human lives, the failed experiments, the adjustments made to non-conforming minds, the children." A heavy silence fell over the room as the enormity of what she was proposing sank in. This wasn't just exposing one secret project. It was challenging the very foundation of Neo-Athena's social order. "If we do this," Nate said finally, "then there's no going back. The directive will use every resource to stop us." "They already are," Kira pointed out. "The difference is, now we're fighting back with the truth. Their greatest weakness has always been that they require deception to maintain control. Once that deception is exposed, the system collapses," Eliza finished, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Just like you always said it would." Kira nodded, the merged identities within her, the principled scientist and the skilled agent finding common purpose at last. "Let's get to work." The plan they developed over the next 48 hours was audacious in its scope and precision. Using Kira's intimate knowledge of directive protocols combined with the Resistance's technical expertise, they would infiltrate the headquarters' secure server room and broadcast the full evidence of the directive's abuses directly to every neural interface in Neo-Athena. It would be a massive violation of the very mental privacy they were fighting to protect, but a necessary one. A single moment of uninvited contact to end years of systematic intrusion. As the operation date approached, Kira spent hours reviewing the evidence they had compiled, not just on Project Lighthouse, but on the entire history of the Mind Directive's ethical violations. The pattern was clear. What had begun as a well-intentioned effort to prevent crime through thought monitoring had evolved into an apparatus of control. With Director Cross and his protege Mercer at its center, the night before the operation, Kira found herself unable to sleep, the weight of what they were about to attempt pressing heavily on her. She made her way to the roof of the safe house, seeking fresh air and a moment of clarity. Neo-Athena spread before her, its illuminated spires and platforms creating a landscape of light against the night sky. Somewhere in that glittering expanse was the Mind Directive headquarters, where she had spent 8 years as an unwitting tool of the very system she had once fought against. "Beautiful view," Nate's voice came from behind her. "Easy to forget what it costs." Kira turned as he joined her at the edge of the roof. "I used to believe in it, you know, even before they reprogrammed me. The idea that thought monitoring could create a safer, more harmonious society. Most people still believe that," Nate observed. That's what makes tomorrow so dangerous. We're not just exposing the directive's abuses, we're challenging a worldview that many people depend on. I know. Kira's gaze returned to the city. But living a comfortable lie isn't freedom. And what the directive has been doing goes far beyond monitoring. It's control, manipulation, fundamental violations of human autonomy. What if people prefer the lie? Nate asked quietly. What if they choose security over freedom of thought? It was the question that had haunted Kira since recovering her memories. The possibility that their mission might fail not because they couldn't expose the truth, but because society might reject it. Then at least it will be their choice, she said finally. Made with full knowledge of what they're accepting. That's all I ever wanted. Informed consent. The right to know what's being done to your own mind. Nate nodded, understanding. For what it's worth, I think you were right 8 years ago and you're right now. People deserve to know the truth, whatever they decide to do with it. As dawn broke over Neo Athena, the resistance team moved into position. The infiltration would require perfect timing and coordination, a decoy operation to draw security attention. Followed by Kira and a small team accessing the server room through maintenance tunnels she had memorized during her time as an agent. Communications check. Eliza's voice came through the secure channel in Kira's earpiece. Team Alpha in position, came the response from the decoy group. The beta team ready, Nate confirmed from his position monitoring the security grid. Gamma team in place, Kira reported, leading the 4-person infiltration team through the lower maintenance access. Proceeding to entry point Delta. The plan unfolded with methodical precision. When Alpha Team triggered their distraction, a simulated attack on the directive's public records division, security resources shifted predictably, creating the opening Kira's team needed. Using her agent access codes, not yet deactivated due to the confusion surrounding her disappearance, Kira guided her team through the service corridors that honeycombed the headquarters' lower levels. Their destination, the central server hub that housed the directive's most sensitive data and controlled its neural broadcast capabilities. Security alert in Sector 4, Nate warned through the comm. Additional forces being deployed from your vicinity. Understood, Kira replied, adjusting their route. Alternate path through Maintenance Tunnel 16. The deeper they penetrated into the headquarters, the greater the risk of discovery. Kira's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination as they approached the final security checkpoint before the server hub. This requires director-level authorization, one of the team members whispered, examining the advanced security panel. I don't have that, Kira admitted, but I know someone who does. She activated her neural interface, connecting to the secure communication channel used exclusively by senior directive personnel. Dr. Yang, it's Stone. I need your help. The response came almost immediately. I wondered when I'd hear from you. Location. The server hub access point, we need director clearance. A pause, then. You're planning to broadcast the evidence, all of it. Yes, will you help us? Another longer pause. Kira held her breath, aware that everything depended on this moment. Yang had shown sympathy for her cause, had even helped her begin to recover her memories. But actively assisting in the infiltration was a far greater risk. Authorization code transmitting now, came Yang's reply finally. Mercer is in emergency meetings about your escape. You have approximately 12 minutes before the system flags an unauthorized access. Thank you, Kira said, genuine gratitude in her voice as the access panel accepted Yang's transmitted code and the massive security door began to slide open. Don't thank me yet, Yang responded grimly. What you're about to do will change everything. Make sure it's worth the cost. The central server hub was a vast chamber. its walls lined with processing units that controlled every aspect of the Mind Directive's operations. At its center stood the Neural Broadcast Array, the system designed to send emergency communications directly to citizens' neural interfaces. "Set up the data transfer," Kira instructed her team as they moved swiftly to their assigned positions. "We need to upload the complete evidence package and configure it for mass broadcast." As her team worked, Kira approached the main control terminal. This was where her unique expertise was essential. Repurposing the broadcast system meant navigating security protocols she had helped develop in her previous life as a scientist. "Upload at 60%, one of the technicians reported, on 7 minutes remaining before system detection. Kira's fingers flew across the interface, bypassing safeguards and reconfiguring broadcast parameters. The system had been designed to resist precisely this kind of unauthorized use. But its designers had never anticipated that one of their own agents, with both scientific knowledge and security clearance, would be the one attempting it. 90%, the technician updated. 5 minutes. A warning flashed across Kira's terminal. "Unauthorized protocol modification detected. Security alert initiated." "They know we're here," she announced, continuing her work without pausing. "Finish the upload. I'll hold the broadcast system open as long as possible." "Agent Stone." The voice came from behind them, confident and coldly familiar. Kira turned to see Director Valen Mercer standing in the doorway, flanked by security personnel with weapons drawn. "Or should I say Dr. Stone," Mercer continued, stepping into the server hub with calculated precision. "Your recovery is more complete than we anticipated." Kira positioned herself between Mercer and her team, buying them precious seconds to complete the upload. "It's over. Mercer, everyone is about to learn what the directive has been doing. Project Lighthouse, the children, all of it." "You always were idealistic," Mercer said almost sadly. "Even before the reprogramming. Always believing people wanted the burden of complete truth. They deserve to choose for themselves." "Oh, do they?" Mercer spread his hands, indicating the servers surrounding them. "This system has prevented more suffering, more crime, more chaos than you can imagine. Yes, there were costs. There always are in progress." "Experimenting on children wasn't progress," Kira countered, anger burning through her calculated calm. "Creating permanent neural damage wasn't an acceptable cost. Those early methods were regrettable but necessary steps toward perfecting the technology." Mercer replied, his augmented eyes gleaming with conviction. "You of all people should understand the scientific process." "Upload complete," the technician whispered behind Kira. She nodded almost imperceptibly, keeping her focus on Mercer. "Science without ethics isn't progress, it's atrocity. And you're still doing it, aren't you? Still experimenting, still pushing the boundaries of control. Project Lighthouse never really ended." Something flickered across Mercer's face, confirmation enough. "You can't stop this broadcast," Kira continued, her hand moving toward the final activation sequence on her terminal. "In 30 seconds, every neural interface in Neo-Athena will receive the complete evidence package. Every citizen will know exactly what the directive has been doing in the name of security." "Perhaps," Mercer acknowledged, "but they won't hear it from you." He gestured to his security team, who raised their weapons, not standard neural disruptors but something more lethal. Kira braced herself, knowing she might not survive to see the truth revealed but determined to ensure it would be. In that moment, the server hub's emergency system activated. Alarms blared as fire suppression protocols engaged, flooding sections of the room with containment foam. Through the confusion, Kira caught a glimpse of Dr. Yang at an auxiliary control panel, her expression resolute as she created the diversion. It was all the time Kira needed. She slammed her hand down on the activation sequence, initiating the broadcast. Instantly, the neural array pulsed with energy, transmitting the complete evidence package to every connected interface in the city. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Throughout Neo-Athena, citizens received an unprecedented direct neural transmission, not the usual security alerts or public service information, but raw, unfiltered evidence of the Mind Directive's decades of ethical violations and abuse. In the server hub, Mercer staggered as his own neural interface received the broadcast, bombarding him with evidence of crimes he had helped commit. "What have you done?" he demanded, his voice hoarse with shock and fury. "Restored free thought," Kira replied simply. Security forces from throughout the headquarters were converging on the server hub now, but they too were affected by the broadcast, many hesitating as they processed the disturbing revelations about the organization they served. In the confusion, Kira's team began their planned extraction, using the maintenance tunnels to withdraw from the headquarters. Yang joined them, her decision to openly assist the resistance finally made. "We need to move quickly," she urged as they navigated the tunnels. "The Council will attempt to discredit the broadcast, claim it's been falsified." "They won't succeed," Kira assured her. "We included authentication protocols in the transmission, ways for citizens to verify the evidence independently. The truth is out there now, impossible to contain." As they emerged from the headquarters into the chaotic streets of Neo-Athena, they witnessed the immediate impact of their action. Across the city, people had stopped in their tracks, processing the neural transmission. Some stood in shocked silence. Others gathered in spontaneous groups, discussing what they had just learned. And everywhere, neural interfaces were being voluntarily disconnected as citizens reclaimed their right to private thought. "It's just the beginning," Nate said, joining them at the extraction point. "The directive still has enormous power and influence. They'll fight back." "Let them," Kira replied, watching as Neo-Athena's citizens began the difficult process of confronting a truth long hidden from them. For the first time in decades, it will be a fair fight, people making informed choices about their own minds. In the days that followed, Neo-Athena experienced upheaval unlike anything in its history. The Mind Directive's leadership, including Mercer, was placed under investigation by a hastily formed citizens' commission. The council itself faced public demands for transparency and accountability. Project Lighthouse's survivors, the children, now adults, who had been subjected to experimental neural procedures, came forward with their testimonies, adding human faces to the clinical evidence in the broadcast. And at the center of it all was Kira Stone, both the agent who had enforced thought control and the scientist who had risked everything to expose it. Her dual identity made her uniquely positioned to help guide Neo-Athena through its transformation. "What happens now?" Eliza asked as they stood on the balcony of what had once been a resistant safe house, and was now the headquarters of the newly formed Mind Liberty organization. "Now comes the hard part," Kira replied, looking out at the city where neural interfaces were being redesigned with strict privacy protocols and genuine opt-in requirements. "Building a society that balances security with freedom of thought, creating technology that serves humanity rather than controlling it." "Do you think it's possible?" Nate joined them, his expression thoughtful. "After generations of thought monitoring, can people really readjust to mental privacy?" Kira considered the question, feeling the integrated perspectives of both her scientist and agent selves. "I think they'll create something better than either extreme, not unlimited surveillance, but not complete isolation either. A society where connection is chosen, not imposed." She touched the small dried flower she now carried with her, a symbolic reminder of the fragile, damaged memories that had started her journey back to herself. The mind is resilient. It heals, adapts, grows stronger from trauma. So will Neo Athena. Below them, the city continued its transformation. Citizens engaged in the messy, essential process of redefining their relationship with technology and authority. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't finished. But it was free. Each mind making its own choices. Each thought belonging truly to its thinker. And for Kira Stone, once the perfect agent of control and now an architect of liberation, that was enough. That was everything.